ideas to the screen as well, which I think is really wonderful. And so we're talking about fiction tonight, which is a little bit harder than nonfiction because you don't want to like give the plot points. So it becomes a more interesting, I think, esoteric discussion around your creative process and a lot of other things surrounding why this book and right now and why right now. But I thought that would be an interesting point because you've done so many different genres. And so can you explain, I'll start with you, Mel or Melissa?
Mel.
Mel, okay. Mm-hmm. Mel, you're like a genre bending, number one New York Times bestseller, 1 million books. Like, it seems like you're born with words just come out of you. But every era, every time of your life, every season leads to different creativity. And I'd love to know, like, why an adult novel right now? Why a book about friendship? Like, tell us a little bit about When Stars Align and why right now.
Sure. I was just thinking today that all of my ideas since my child was 10 kind of come from my kid. So Maddie was the inspiration for Alex and Eliza. She was the inspiration for Never After. So Alex and Eliza was a YA book. Never After was a middle grade book. And then this is an adult book. And it actually came from her saying at one point, Paris Hilton is a queen. And I said, really? Because I came from the generation,
tabloid times.
The tabloids, and I was a journalist when she was a teenager. And I actually remember, I wouldn't say meeting, but bumping into her and Nikki in the bathroom when they were 15 and 17. And they seemed so adult and so old at such a young age that they actually inspired Blue Bloods, which was about vampires on the Upper East Side. So it's kind of funny. So I thought, oh my God, Paris Hilton is a queen to these new 18-year-olds. And I thought maybe I should do something about that because at that time, we were kind of hearing about how, what happened to her, how she, survived all these kind of terrible things. And that persona was like really crafted. And Britney Spears, kind of what she went through and how the media portrayed her. And even Lindsay Lohan, who was such a great shining star, kind of lost her way and then came back. So I thought, it would be cool to write about these kind of Y2K starlets because they're seen in such a different light. And I thought, I was also inspired by that photograph of the three of them in the car. And I thought, how cool that they were all friends. What was that like? And what if I wrote something, kind of like a fictional kind of wishful thinking, way to kind of maybe alleviate, some of our concerns about what the media did to them and what the culture did to them. So
I love that so much. What about you, Jordan?
Well, this was kind of therapy for me. I was going through the process of trying to get my daughter into a private middle school, and I saw a lot of people around me behaving badly, and I wasn't behaving so well either. So I just was like, let's see what happens if we amp it up by like 100, and then everyone has affairs, and there's a bear, and there's lots of other things that happen, and yeah.
This is the middle school that my kid goes to too.
Yes. And yeah, we got off the wait list after a week of hell, and yes, that was, and now we're very happy, and now my son's going there too. So,
so let's talk a little bit about. I'll ask you this, Jordan. When you add a murder in, so what genre of book do you think this is? Do you think it's thriller? Do you think it's friendship fiction? Do you think it's like White Lotus type fiction? What
I think
where do you think it sits?
I think it sits in the White Lotus tone satire. According to Amazon, it's women's humorous fiction. Take it. Oh yeah. And it's also like dark humor, and I'm a comedy writer, and so it was really fun to write something that had a little bit of depth and a lot of comedy, and still told the story, and hopefully, I wouldn't call it a thriller, but I would say that there is a mystery element to it.
Well, I just was laughing because Nell's blurb for you is why I'm here as your moderator. It's a thin line between mental load and murder for these Los Angeles moms with the best intentions who will do anything to protect their children and their reputations. Moms Like Us is a hysterical, satirical, sexy novel you won't be able to put down. So anything with mental load and murder, I will show up for. And so, can you talk a little bit about friendship? I think it's perfect that your book came out sort of with this kind of new conversation around revisiting like you said, these Y2K stars, sort of a reckoning for them at the same time as A White Lotus comes out, and we're looking more critically at female friendship. So can you talk a little bit, I'll start with you, Mel, about your views of female friendship and what did you want to convey about friendship?
Yeah, it was interesting because I watched that White Lotus, thinking, oh my God, I mean, this woman does not have any friends. Like, these people are not your friends, because I thought it was just so toxic and so kind of, mean about female friendships. Like, I didn't think he quite got it right. But then at the end, when, she had that beautiful speech and it was like, then I was like, it's just right. Our friends suck and we love them anyway. So then I thought, well, we got that right. I don't know. I think it's really important. Like, the older even we get, how important those female friendships are. I mean, certainly you're so lucky if you have them young, I don't think I really had really close female friendships until I was in college. Those girls, I was just thinking about them on the drive today. I was like, oh no, I went to New York for one day and didn't see them. I'm going to be in so much trouble, But some of my closest friends I've met when I was 40, So I think you can always make them at every stage.
Love that. Jordan?
So it's interesting because I am such a girl's girl and I grew up with the same 3 best friends, went to this school in New York for 15 years together and we're still close. One of them threw my book party in New York and I have really great girlfriends. A lot of you are here today. And if you're not yet, you will be by the end of the evening. And it's interesting because I do think one of the things that this book became, which I was kind of surprised by, was that there isn't a lot of crossover in terms of their friendship. There are 4 different perspectives, and there's a lot of posturing, which is, I guess, what it was about and what I was kind of going through when I wrote it, is like how we pretend to be versus how we're actually feeling inside, what we show other women and women competing with each other. And ultimately, I don't want to give anything away, but that how they could potentially find a common ground at the end. But for me, my female friendships are just, aside from my family and my whole life, So, and throughout my life, and every time I thought like, oh, it's too late in your life to make more friendships, you do. We were in an office together a couple of years ago. We had an all women's office, and we made all these new friends in that office, and we're all still friends. So you never know.
I love that so much. So Mel, given how prolific you are, how do you avoid burning out, or how did what does your life look like?
I like to go on vacation, so I kind of dream about when I won't be on deadline anymore. And literally, I think when I'm done with the book, I've forgotten about it. It's kind of my obsession, especially that last 2 weeks, that last month when I'm trying to finish it. It's like the only thing that's on my mind, and I just want it off my plate. And I just turned in a book 2 weeks ago, and now my husband and I work on the books together, and so we're working on book 2. Really, he's working on book 2, and he said, "So what do you want to happen in this book?" And I said, "I don't even remember what happened in the first book." So I think that my way of resetting is just completely blank slate. Like, I do not remember that book at all. So it's really hard to promote them, because I promote them a year later after turning them in. And by the time we're talking about it, I just have no idea what I'm talking about anymore.
But that must help because, well, what's your least favorite stage of the process? Is it the marketing stage or?
Yes, because I think, but I enjoy meeting readers. I really do. So I always dread it because it's not part of my natural habitat, which is being alone. I really just like working on the books, and then talking about them is a little difficult because it's like, well, is that right? That was the inspiration. It's like I come up with answers, but I don't know if that's true.
Well, it's interesting that you were just referring to writing as a very solitary process. I don't know those of you who have solitary careers, but what's interesting is both of you have lots of collaborators also along the way. You were just saying that someone's here from your writer's room, Jordan.
Oh yeah.
Yes, and yes, hi. And you collaborate with your husband, and so what is it like to have to collaborate with somebody on a creative process? Is it preferred that way, or would it be easier to do it by yourself?
Well, I mean, for me, it depends on the project. So if I'm writing on a show, I love being in a writer's room as long as it's not a toxic writer's room. So, so in that sense, like I love that I come from sketch comedy. I love writing with other people. But I'm also used to, even when I'm working alone, working with producers who are collaborative and creative. Writing a novel, I've never written with someone else. I mean, you have.
I have. Several times. I wrote one with Rachel. Who's here. Yay! That comes out in November, so we're excited.
Do you remember what it's about?
I do. That one I remember.
Rachel does.
It's called My Ex-Husband's Ex-Husband.
Really
cool.
Great title.
And that was fun because we traded the characters and the chapters, so I always knew which one I was going to be working on. My husband and I kind of work on things a little bit more like we can do everything. So I'll have the idea, I'll write a synopsis, he'll write the outline, I'll write the first draft, and then we trade it back and forth. And sometimes it's annoying because I'm like, I like that, and you cut it, So, but we try not to fight too much anymore.
Well, it seems to be working really well for both of you. So can we talk a little bit about the cover, the design process? I was saying this, you both have great covers. I love anytime there's like a pun or a double meaning, I love it. So when stars align is amazing. But can you talk a little bit about the cover?
So this is a fun story that I love telling. I think Carmen, my editor, who I love, probably doesn't like it as much. But so they sent me a cover, and it was like marshmallows roasting on a campfire, and I was not excited. And then there was like a travel mug, and it just said like the title of the book, and then actually I started going on to AI, whatever they are, and can you tell them Gen X? I made my own covers, and basically it was what I made was a female, very like human-like bear wearing pearls and red lipstick, and she held in one hand a fire extinguisher and in the other hand a martini. And my editor's response was, I can't unsee this. and I was like, but that's the cover. And she's like, no, that's not the cover. Let us regroup and come back to you. And I'm like, okay, just regroup toward this direction. And that's how we got this. So, and they got on the first shot. They sent this to me and I was like, yep, that's it. So I was really excited about it. So that's my
Mel, what about you?
story.
Yeah, I think they sent me the mock-up, of this photo, and I thought it was just a mock-up, and then it turned out to be the cover. I'm like, I guess because it didn't seem clear whether they had bought that photo or they staged it. I think they bought it, but yeah, I liked it. You know, my agent came up with the title. He's pretty good with titles. Nobody ever likes my titles. You know?
Well, but we have the same
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit
editor.
about this. So
Yes.
you're here together for many reasons, but can you talk about the synergies and how, or the similarities and your,
So
what
we
happened?
have the same editor, and throughout this whole process, and I found out that we sold books to the same editor. We were already friends, obviously, for years. Like I found out, and I reached out to Mel, and throughout the whole process, like, is this how, you know, reaching out, like, how painful is it to write that? Like, I'm having such a hard time. She's like, oh, I finished 2 months ago,
Yeah.
or like, or I haven't started, and then a week later, she's like, I'm done, and then I was like, oh, the cover, it's like such a nightmare. Do I speak up? Do I do this? And she's like, I don't think I have a cover. I don't know what the cover is. Like, oh, I think there's a photograph. Oh, here's the cover. And you're like very like, you were like I was like the problem child, and you were like the easy one. So, you know.
I just think like my nightmare is that I forget that I have a book due, because I actually now have like 5 or 6 publishers. I don't even know anymore. But I'm pretty sure I write for all of them except for Harper, unless Harper bought one of the imprints that I write for. So then I actually do write for them also.
Oh, what I think is so interesting. So what I write about men doing housework and childcare, but my second book is really about women who've lost their identity. And part of the process of getting back to reclaiming your identity was asking a lot of mental health professionals, what does it mean to be mentally healthy? And I think the beauty of that conversation was I was able to, my kids now speak it back to me that my mother doesn't want me to be happy. But that's not really what the goal is. The goal, and I've said this before here, is that it's not about happiness. Mental health is having appropriate emotions at appropriate time and having the ability and strength to weather those emotions. Now, part of weathering those emotions that I talk about in Unicorn Space are 3 things: curiosity, sharing yourself with the world, connection, and completion. The reason why I bring that up is because so many of the people that I interviewed for my second book, especially women who were caregivers, parents, partners, and professionals that had nothing outside of that, or reported that you know they had lost the interest in their own lives. It wasn't that they didn't have curiosity. It wasn't even that they were not willing to share themselves with the world, but they were conflating completion and perfection. So they were like, what's the point of starting a podcast? It's not going to be the top podcast on the Apple podcast. What's the point of writing a book? It may never even get published. So I actually think, Mel, you have a very interesting view about completion, because it's not perfection, right? You didn't know what your cover was going to look like. You said, you know, you're on to your next book. You sort of gave your editor a chance to weigh in on the title. So can you talk a little bit about how you give up this notion of perfection to get to completion?
Oh my God. I think I just really like turning things in. You know, I really like delivering, you know. And I think I'm a people pleaser, you know. I also don't turn down any jobs. You know, so, you know, this editor who was a fan of mine has a project, Simon Schuster, and my agent was like, we really should not do this, you know, like, let's not do this project. It's too little money. It's da-da-da. I said, no, I'm taking it. I'm doing it. You know, she was a fan. It was fun. Whatever. I like the idea. You know, he was like, oh my God, I'm quitting as your agent. Like, no. But I don't know. I put my name on everything. I was writing in New York. I used to write for the New York Times, the New York Press. And then, like, I think the West Side Resident asked me to do an article. And I said, sure, I'll write an article for $50 about flower shops. I don't know. I don't really turn down things. You know, people are able to find me and they're interested in my work. I usually say, I really do not say no to things. And yeah, I don't think it has to be perfect. I don't think it has to be in the genre. I think I got really lucky because I did work in children's publishing. So because you work in YA, you're allowed to do any genre because that's YA. So it's a thriller, it's a vampire, it's a romance. It's still under YA. So I was able to say, oh, I've written a thriller before. I YA thrillers. I can write an adult thriller. I don't know. So that's kind of how I was able to move within a lot of genres.
Well, it's funny because a lot of really excellent people say that. One of the people I interviewed for my book said, in military training, the only reason you can jump in the Navy SEALs from these really high up platforms is because you start with a low platform and you jump, and then you jump a little further, and then you jump. And so I think that's interesting that YA gave you some of that confidence to say, I can write a book for adults or a book about friendship because I've done that already, or I've written a thriller already. And so what about you, Jordan? Did YA, what helped you most in this sort of the first genre for, say, like the adult world?
Well, so I started in YA also, and I do feel like there was, especially when we started writing, there was a real freedom in YA that, you know, the expectation wasn't that high, and you know, I'm not like really a trained writer, and I just wrote how I spoke, and I had a lot of fun with it, and I had 2 books published, and then I started writing for TV and film, and it wasn't until the strike happened, and we actually share an agent, and he texted me because I had told him I was working on this thing, and I wasn't sure if it was a journal or it was a novel, and he was like, I like it. He's like, I hate all these women, but I like it. And I was kind of like, there's some things you should like about them. Like, okay, like okay, we can massage that later. But then he texted me when the strike started, and he's like, great time to write a novel. And I said, and this is part of the perfection versus completion, was like, I said, I know myself. I'm not going to write this in a vacuum.
Yeah.
So you need to sell it off of these pages. And if you can, I'll write it. And so he did. And
can you talk a little bit more about that? So
yeah.
What does that mean, not writing in a vacuum?
I wasn't going to write it on my own, just like in a room without having, you know, somebody waiting for it. And without having a editor who said, like, can we go more in this direction? Can we go more? And like, to my editor's credit, she was pretty chill. Like she
Yes.
she
the same editor, right?
Yeah. She was really easy, and I had another editor who I worked with named Ronit, who I loved, and we would get together and have these like therapy sessions and we would like really told stories about our lives, and you know, especially after my first draft. There was a moment that they wanted to get rid of one of the characters. So there's 4 points of view, and they wanted to get rid of one of them. And I felt very strongly, because one of them, her voice wasn't coming through. And I felt really strongly, I heard what they were saying, but that I could find her voice. And actually, a friend of mine had a situation where she didn't get into a tennis club. And she was really upset about that, and for good reason. And it kind of, you know, helped me find that character. And so if I hadn't had those people there guiding me and helping me, and having already paid me part of an advance that I had to, you know, finish this book, I would never have finished it. Plus, then the strike ended, and I was like, I need to get back to TV and film, but actually, I didn't, apparently.
Exactly. So can you talk about that, about capitalizing on different opportunities? I'll start with you, Jordan. So, as you said, this research is, I like to say, is often research. A lot of people say that too. So, like you said, this was a journal or a novel.
Yes.
And then you got this push to make it a novel because of the timing. Can creative ideas be in different genres? Like, could this have become a screenplay? Could this have just stayed as your journal? So again, sort of this is back to the second C. So we're just talked about completion versus perfection is the third C. The second C that I try to encourage is sharing yourself with the world.
Yeah.
So this idea could have stayed a journal.
Yeah.
Just like, you know, you could teach the Soul Cycle class, or you could just attend it, right? It's a lot harder. You have to share yourself with the world. That's where our growth happens. You have arrested development if you don't take risks.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about that process of sharing it with the world, because it could have stayed a journal.
Yes.
But it didn't.
Right. So I think, to your point, there have been a lot of different points in my life that like when I first met Richard and he's like, write a YA novel. And I was like, okay. And and then I did, I wrote the 50 pages and he sold it. I said, what do I need to do? Just tell me what I need to do. He said, write 50 pages, write a synopsis. If it's good, I'll sell it. And he came up with my title too, Girl in Development. Yeah. And so I did, but like I could have very easly just not done that. I met him at a party and he's like, I'm a book agent, you should do this. And I was like, okay. And that was how it started. This thing, I was on the glamping trip with my family when he sent this text and saying you should write a novel. And, I kind of brought this thing out of the basement of my mind and brought it back to life. And so I think I forgot your question.
Well, no, you answered the question. Absolutely.
I feel like I always forget the question.
Yes,
I
No,
know.
you absolutely answered the question. And so I think it's very interesting, sort of what that process is. Like I said, the difference between a journal and bringing it to the world. So,
and I also thought it could be a TV show, and I structured it as a TV writer. I structured the book into different parts, which were into different school events, so that those would each be a different episode. So that when I went to sell it, it would be like, all right, that's easy, and and then now I'm trying to sell it, and nothing is easy, but it's fine. We'll figure it out.
You'll figure it out, exactly. And so, Mal, can you talk a little bit about character, like especially when you're writing so many different things at once? What is your process? Do you outline? Do you know? This is a question sort of from my son. Do you know your ending before you write, or do things develop over time? And another question he had is, I think executive function is always a big thing for kids, or 16-year-olds. Like, how do you keep track of all your characters?
So I do outline. So usually I come up with like a concept, I guess, like, I want to write about, fairy tales that come to life, although that one, it didn't happen that quickly. I'll tell you about how that other book happened. So I watched Game of Thrones, and in Game of Thrones, Jon Snow and Ygritte, I don't know if you guys watch Game of Thrones, but anyway, they have it come to a tragic ending. She dies, he's sad. And then I opened Us Weekly, and there was the actor, Kit Harington, marrying Rose, I can't remember her last name, but the actress of Ygritte, and they were getting married, and I felt so happy. Because I'm like, oh my God, in an alternate universe, they're alive and they're getting married. So I thought, what if I wrote a book where they were actors, but they were also real life fantasy people? So I kind of played with that idea, and then I wrote as a YA proposal. It didn't quite work. So I thought, maybe I'll do it as a middle grade story. And I thought, well, what if it was a fairy tale, instead of just like kind of this weird legend I made up. And then so it became a middle grade story called Never After. I also have forgotten the question.
I feel so much better now.
Well, yes, you're answering absolutely the right questions. And I think what I wanted to basically understand was sort of how.
So, and then I outline things. So it's a chapter by chapter outline, but I always know the end. I always know the end. The end of the series or the end of the book, I always know the end. So I actually start with the end and then I build up. And then I also usually know the beginning. Sometimes the beginning is a little harder to place, where you write like a lot of boring stuff and then you have to cut it and say, actually the book starts here. But the end, absolutely, I know that from the beginning. I usually don't change the ending, very, very, I would say very rarely have I done that, because I'm pretty sure
I love that too, because it doesn't have to be how we were taught in school. Like, you start with your thesis statement and then right to the end, right? And tell me, do you do the same?
No. Well, I did not necessarily know my ending, but there were a lot of arguments about the ending. Richard, well, I don't want to say, but he wanted someone else to die.
Okay.
He wanted someone dies. I'm not giving anything away. That's in the beginning.
Yeah.
He wanted a different person to die, and I was very upset about the person who he wanted to die, and that person was not going to die. So, so we, so for me, I wasn't exactly sure what the ending was going to be. I definitely knew what the beginning was because it all started at back to school night, and it started with the the fire, and which was bad timing now, but it started in Santa Barbara, and then it's back to school night. So I always knew that was my start, and then I kind of built to the ending.
The middle is always hard.
The middle is
so boring.
really
And
so
and I tend to just cut things because I'll just write it and I'll be like, oh, it's so boring. So I'll just cut.
I was
like
able.
middles.
I was able to add a lot of emails in there. That was helpful.
Oh, yeah.
That was good. That was like, I can just write an email here. So I added some of those. That helped with the middle.
It's fascinating, right? Because I think readers we need the middle, right?
I guess.
Yeah.
You need the middle.
You need the middle, or at least you need some of those red herrings, or the plot and character development. But it's interesting how the creative process works, and it doesn't have to be the same for everybody.
Yeah.
And so, just quick questions. I think it's interesting, without again revealing anything. Why did Richard want someone else to die? Like, what was his? I'm just curious. When somebody that's a pretty big change.
Yes.
Or like lopping off. We understood
Yes.
why they want to lop off a character, but I'm just curious, what is the impetus for something like that in a reader?
I think he thought that this character did not have any redeeming, did not have redeeming qualities, and I disagreed with him about that. And it felt like that was like a very kind of masculine,
gendered tale.
Yes.
This woman had qualities that men wanted to kill off.
Yes.
A lot of those.
Yes, we do. I love him. So
But it's
we'll
just
never watch.
yes.
Oh yeah, no, we can talk.
Yeah.
We can talk trash about it all night long.
That's still love it. He's an agent. So I love that, and so I think that's really, really. I just find it very interesting. The creative process I find really, really interesting.
Well, for me, it was also like I didn't name any of the men in my book for it, and that was quite intentional. And part of that had to do with like the wanting to really center this book around these women, which was one of the reasons why I had a hard time with him about who he wanted to kill. Because for me, it's all about them versus when I got engaged, it was like, oh, are you going to take his name? And I already had 2 published novels, and I was like, no, this is my name. I've had my name forever. Well, don't you want to have the same name as your kids? And I'm like, oh, so I should feel guilty about that and the breastfeeding and all the other things. And then, and then, when I had kids, then suddenly you go to like the doctor's office, and they were like, Mom, can you come here? I'm like, I'm not your mom. I'm not like this is, and I just felt like this complete erasure of my identity. And not that I wasn't proud to be a mom, and even like, school emails and things like that. It was like, who are you again? Oh, Gemma's mom. Like, very proud to be that, but I also have a name. And so for me, I wanted all the women to have names, and the men and children belong to them. Like kind of like a reverse Handmaid's Tale.
Yes, I love it. I talk about that a lot, just how easy it is to get roped into wearing your children's initials on your neck. And I talked about that last time. Like, one of the biggest prescriptions I have for women is wear your own initial on your neck and make sure your kids see that. Do not wear mom, because you have a name, and your children should know that you have a name. And so when I do wear a necklace, it's always my own initial. So I think that's really interesting. Okay, question for you, Mel, again from my son. What's scarier, sharing it at first to get the first feedback from your editor, or to get the first feedback from the Goodreads or the world?
I was never that scared of sending my stuff out, because I would always think if they didn't like it, they were wrong. I got rejected from all the MFA programs.
We should all just tattoo that on our. If they didn't like it, they were wrong.
Yeah, they were wrong.
So,
It's not that I don't accept feedback, I think some constructive criticism is always good. I think Goodreads is not good for authors,
No.
but I do think from a marketing perspective, it's good to know what people think about your book. I've never been the kind of writer that everybody liked, and I was just thinking about that today driving over. I thought, I like what I like, and I have a real opinion about things, and it's okay if you don't like what I like, because I probably don't like what you like, and that's okay, just like not every, just for instance, Mother's Day, and there's a lot of oh, I saw something that said to anybody who has a mother, knows a mother, met a mother. I was like, well, that's everybody, but this is Mother's Day. I'm sorry, it's for me. It's not because you ran into somebody on the street. So I just feel like there's a little bit of oh, it's for everybody. Well, if it's not for everybody, it's for nobody, and I feel like White Lotus, the reason it does so well is because he has such an opinion about things, and it's so clear. And you could not enjoy it or argue with it, but at least it's a specific point of view. And I feel like we've gotten away in storytelling where we want it to mean something for everybody. And I just feel like, well, then who's the story for?
That's right.
So I don't know. I just feel like it's okay if not everybody likes it. Of course, my editor would like that, more than ever, they want blockbusters where they want everybody to like it. But I just think that's just really hard to do, all the niche things now, though, where it's so specific, this thing where we're all on our phones and there's 1,000 influencers. I think you are losing something there also. It would be nice to have a common mainstream culture, for sure.
But there are some universal themes, and you play with those universal themes, such as friendship, which I think is really beautiful, but you do it differently, which is also great. So, and who reads? Are both your books on audio, on Audible? Or
Yes. Helen.
Do you like your narrator? That's what I just wanted to ask.
Obsessed with mine.
I have never listened to any of
ever. She's like, what is that? I have listened
free because again, I love your creative process.
I've listened to mine. She's incredible. She also did The Wedding People, which I loved.
Oh,
and,
yes.
Helen Laser.
Amazing. Well, shout out because I always think
she's amazing. She's so good. It's worth it. You should buy it too.
Yeah, yes, I like to skip. To do. I always have a book on my Kindle, hard copy, and also on audio. And my kids think I'm crazy, but it's just the way I read.
There was one scene that was super, super important to me where the principal who this character has been fighting with says to the mom who's trying to get her daughter into school, did you ever think that you were the problem? And the mom looks at her and says, every fucking day. Every fucking day. That's my, that's how I think a lot of us
gave me my nightmare.
Yes. It's we put so much pressure on ourselves and we're really hard on ourselves. And I think that's a lot of what goes into this. And I think the female friendships, you support each other and you help each other through those things. And I think, what they struggle with a bit in my book is not having those female friendships.
Well, again, in a sort of capitalist patriarchy, women are told we're allowed to be three things, right? We're allowed to be parents, partners, and our professionals. So there's not much room outside of that. So sometimes it's easier to be complicit in our own oppression. As this amazing psychologist said to me for my first book, Fair Play, if you don't have the ability to sort of see outside of your roles, then oftentimes, again, it's easiest to make your unicorn space, what I call it, the perfection of your children.
Yeah.
And that's not great for any of us. But again, it's because we live in a system. So I think what's beautiful is you're not blaming the women. We become a product of making it easier to live within that system. And so thank you for indulging me and my questions. I wanted to open it up. I think we went a little over because I was supposed to only ask questions for 30 minutes and open it up. But you had some interesting things to say. So thank you for being here. Can I open it up to questions? tell me, because I have more.
I'll ask
Yes, please.
Hi, ladies.
Oh,
Hi. I wonder if you could both talk just very briefly about the skills you have as TV writers that you had to put on mute to write novels.
Great
And
question.
I know for George, I know now you did the TV work after you did a novel, but like maybe talk about the difference. Or not, you know.
Yeah.
I was gonna say I dread it. I
dread
do
the
not.
TV writing?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm not a natural script writer, you know. I think I turned in my first script for a TV movie for Hallmark, and they called my agent, "What is this?" You know? They were like, "Oh my god," you know. So I was like, "Okay, whatever." My name is on that movie. None of that is me. I don't think they even kept the name of the cafe. It was a really good name, you know. I was just like, wow, they didn't even keep the cafe name.
Do you remember what it was?
Oh god, so it was called Angel Falls, and
You remember that?
yeah, I remember the title. I remember the title. I think the cafe. It was like some pun. I don't remember the cafe. I'll look it up though.
Look it up, totally.
I really missed the length of. I write comedy, so like I really missed a 25-page, in final draft thing. I really like going on, page 150. I was like, this is not cool.
The middle.
Yeah, the middle was
The
the
middle.
middle. Let's put in an email. And so, I think I really miss that, but there is also something very freeing about writing prose. I don't have to worry about ending an act. I don't have to worry about, you just kind of write, which is fun. And so when I would get on a roll and I was really going for it, it was, it felt great. Whereas it's much more like kind of stilted when you're writing TV. It's just like the scenes are short and you're trying to make things happen as quickly as possible. And so I think that's a really good question, Karen.
I have a follow-up on that. Is dialogue, even though there's dialogue in both, are they different type of dialogue when you have to recite it? Like when there's an actor behind it, or it's similar dialogue?
I think at least for me, it's pretty similar. I think that in TV writing, it's, you really write how they speak or how they should speak it or how you want an actor to deliver it versus in a book that is just supposed to flow more. But I think they're pretty similar. What do you think?
Yeah, I think they have to sound like people, no matter what. But what I love about screenwriting is that I get insurance. So, and I like how, it's so like, kind of like, this is one draft and then you get paid for a rewrite and you get paid for another rewrite. Like you don't just rewrite it endlessly like in books.
Yes.
So that's kind of nice, I like the structure of that. Although I'm a kind of a natural fit, so I started in chick lit. Actually, my first book was an adult kind of chick lit book, and then from there I did YA. And YA back then was about 50,000 words, and even my adult novel was about 50,000 words. So that's my kind of natural length of how I write. I really write in that length. So every time, but now YA got so long, thanks J.K. Rowling, it's long. So now, so then it had to be like 100,000 words, which is so long for me, So I'm like,
is this 100,000 words?
No.
Yeah.
I barely got to 70.
Oh, I think, I don't know why it's so thick. I think there's just like 68,000.
Maybe a big print.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think that's the font for
Not that big of print.
No.
I don't think you remember now.
I know.
More, yes.
Do you guys find time to read yourselves, and what do you like to read?
Great question.
Yeah.
I really do. It ebbs and flows. Like especially if like I get stuck on a book that I don't love, then suddenly I won't read anything for like 3 weeks. But I'm like you, where I'm listening to something on Audible. I'm reading something else. I just listened to The Wedding People which I just absolutely
Same.
loved. And I
Loved it.
have been reading, I was like a little late to the Emily Henry party, and so I've been reading some of her other books because I'm like, how do I write something that sells 9 gazillion copies?
Yeah.
Because I'm like, I could do this. This is so anyway, that's the goal next time. And then I read on my Kindle and I read actual books, which I also love doing. So I'm trying to think.
Yeah, I think you have to read if you're a writer.
Yeah.
You know, I'm always shocked when writers say they don't read. Like, why? Why are you a writer then? You know, my favorite genre is cooking memoirs because that for me is like a fantasy. You know, I would never be able to cook like that. But I read bestsellers. I like to read what people are reading. So I like to know what people want to read, basically. I think there's something like 4 million regular readers in the United States. So basically the game of selling is selling to the people who read. You know, you actually don't really want to sell to people who are like, oh, I read a book a year or a book every 10 years. I think I did an event and one of my, I don't know if my friend, I don't know, I'm sorry if you were my friend, but somebody told me that they hadn't read a book in 12 years. And I thought, wow, okay. You know, so really you want to sell to those 4 million active readers in the United States.
Given that we're like a country of 300 million, it's pretty depressing how little those active readers are. But also I understand if you're a woman, you get a pass because you're doing unpaid labor, and I understand why you don't have the time. And also men don't read women, so that's another real problem. We lose a lot of the 4 million. A lot of them are men, and only 20% of men admit to buying women authors.
Wow.
So it's even probably worse than that.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So women have a much smaller audience to start with. Also, our books in nonfiction are called self-help, and men's books are called leadership, as we know. So. I see with all the leadership authors, even though we're in the same Amazon categories. So yeah, it's really interesting. So
You're in
it's hard.
self-help?
I'm saying in the Amazon categories, it's all time management. But when I get introduced at like a conference, like I was at Milken, I'm known as a self-help author, and they're known as leadership authors, even though we're both in the time management category on Amazon. So, and a lot of people, it's not just me saying that. Like it's known that that's just a problem with the nonfiction genre, and it's also the problem with, again, if you have it's why a lot of women took pen names in the past, because they wanted men or male children in YA like J.K. Rowling to read their books, and they knew the stats that men don't buy women's books.
Yeah.
So we got to change that, right?
Take what your opportunity.
Yes. Okay. Yes. I have more
Thanks, Tina.
questions. We have time for 2 more questions. Questions?
I have a
Yes.
question. Now that your books are out in the world, it might not be long enough yet, but now that you've hopefully had readers of these books that you don't know, have any reactions surprised you? Because there's always the book you think who wrote versus the one a stranger reads that is different than what you thought. I'm just curious if you had any experiences like that.
I had some friends' moms read it, and there's some sexy stuff in here, guys. So I had some friends' moms read it and reach out to me and like said the nicest things, and that they had so much fun reading it. And I was like, this is. I was nervous about putting that into the world, and I was really made me feel really good that they weren't like, oh my God, she's I shouldn't be friends with her anymore. So anyway, that's and I just like anytime that I hear from somebody who isn't like a friend of mine that they enjoyed it, I'm like, really? Oh, great! Yes, great. No, I'm very touched by it.
Yeah. I saw an Amazon review that was kind of funny. Like it was kind of mean. It was just said, what a waste of time. You know? And I just laughed, because like sometimes it's like, are they reviewing the book? Or are they reviewing that it's inspired by celebrities? You know what I mean? So
Are they just having a bad day?
Are they just having a bad day?
Yeah.
Exactly. So, I'm sorry to entertain you, but I laughed.
I did get a review. I have a 1-star review, and it starts with wow, I really dislike this book. And I wrote a response that started with, wow, I really dislike this review. And like, I went after each of her points, like why they were wrong and all this. And I sent it to my husband and my friends. And they were like, this is hilarious and great. Please don't post it anywhere. From everything and be done. And so that's what I did. But I have a copy somewhere, so you never know.
That's where it stays journal, not novel.
Yes, that's right.
Yes.
That's right.
And sometimes you can just rant at the world, and you have to laugh. But I think Mel, what you said earlier is it applies for everything, right? This idea that we're not here to be everything to all people.
Oh, yeah, no.
Yeah.
And I think, again, as women, we're sometimes taught that, especially in all our roles. So it's nice to hear that again, that you can just be firm in your boundary, that you're for you and for, that they're wrong. They are so wrong.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it's really their problem.
Yeah.
Okay, one last question. Yes.
How do you guys feel about AI?
Ooh.
Good question. I mean, it really helped me with my cover. So and I have to say, I find it helpful sometimes, like, if I need to like organize my thoughts and I have like all this stuff and I just say like, put this into a better, so it's still all my ideas, but they are suddenly like neat and formatted. And so I really appreciate that. But it's gonna end up killing us all, and everything's. But but for me right now, it's great.
I mean, I don't think it'll ever replace the creative process because it's not creative; it's derivative. Even when AI started, it's like, oh, it's just going to write all the Hallmark movies, let's say, because all the Hallmark movies are the same. And one of the current Hallmark movies is Hot Frosty. So Frosty the Snowman comes to life as a hot guy.
Yeah.
And I don't think any computer can come up with that. I mean, it's like, human ideas are weird and flawed, and that's why I like them, I think AI is good for writing angry letters to the principal.
Yeah.
We did that. We were very mad about the cheer team. And so all my points about, how they were handling the cheer team. And, it spit out this long and my husband said, yeah, it was very wordy. And I said, I don't care. It made me sound really angry, but in a sustained way.
Yeah.
Restrained. So.
I'll just add that I thought it was interesting because I think the kids think maybe ChatGPT is all end all be all. Because my middle son, different son, said to me, "Aren't you glad you wrote your books before ChatGPT so people think you actually wrote them?" And so I said, "Oh, interesting. So no one's gonna ever think an author wrote their books ever since ChatGPT came out." So I think it's an interesting. So I'm like, is that because you've never written anything behind your ChatGPT wrote everything that you said you've written? So I think it was a little projection and confession, as they say. But it is interesting that I wonder how the next generation will feel about that. So it's good that we got some ideas into the world before ChatGPT came out.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see.
A writer friend of mine actually texted me
yes.
yesterday said for the first time she had tried like ChatGPT, and she's like, what have I been doing the last year? She's like, she's like, it just spit out this whole thing, and she's not going to use it, but it's like, you're like, whoa, that was real easy for you. The computer, and it's a lot more with us where we take our time and we have a process, and but
I think the derivative thing is the key, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
because it's not going to read like a book you've written.
no.
Even if it came quick for her, it's still, from a reader perspective, it's going to have all the restrained anger, maybe.
Yeah. A lot of dashes apparently.
But it's not going to have a soul.
Yes.
So, right.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank
I
you.
think we're gonna go Okay, so feel free to get your book signed.
Yeah, we have books up here for sale. Thank you guys so much. That was
Yeah.
so awesome.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yes.